Hello, my name is Bastian, and this is a video response to the video of Simulacron X called Desteni Erotic Series Bernard Poolman of the Cult of Destiny asking a girl undecent things. So here, Simulacron X is referring to, as you can read in the description, to two videos made and published by Destiny Productions called Shaved Bald Girl Faces Hard Questions, a series of two videos actually. And those were done, as I remember, along with the Face World Face Off movement several months ago, and merely as to be understood and apparently seen in context when I watched them at that time, to reveal and show facial expressions and reactions to certain questions, which point to suppressions, conditionings, underlying mind structures that one is most of the time not aware of. And I saw it when watching first time as a cool presentation and a brave step of Katie actually to go through this, facing Bernard's questions and reactions, who is obviously winkling out facts and points and obviously deliberately confronting her with things, as I see that everyone actually should face and reveal in self-honesty as soon as possible, because especially those sexual suppressions lead to all kinds of notorious neurosis, mental illnesses and perversions, etc. But as for the point in this video, Simulacron X obviously does not intend to disclose some sort of intention of those videos, but he merely tries to discredit Bernard Poolman. Interestingly enough, Bernard Poolman seems to attract as much hate as one could possibly imagine, which I never really understood. First of all, I, as a part of Destiny, never put the main interest and focus on Bernhard himself or put any other person of the group in special or leading position, as well as all the others did never intend to do so. But let us look at some designations and labels Simulacron X is making here in regards of these two video interviews. He is labeling the interview, those questioning itself, as malicious, cruel, and repugnant, at least as far as they deal with the sexual topics. So all the other questions here are, as it seems, merely banal. He calls them trite questions. But then immediately when the topic changes to sex, there is obviously an intense reaction, almost seems to be like a shock to the person that is watching and reacting with this video. It might have stressed him as much as the disturbing sound he chooses as a background music for his reaction in this hate video, and he seems to try to transmit his own stressed emotional state while he was watching these videos, while listening to questions of sexual content posed to a woman that dares to stand in front of the camera, showing off that way. Here I could state, and I do, that those videos are about exactly those points, reactions caused by suppressions that lead people to act with hatred and resistance, to react in a suppressive and rejective way. And it is about the realization that we all have allowed and accepted ourselves to become those programmed robots that react, resist, and suppress in whatever ways we are told to. So that is obviously how we as a culture, as the people, have suppressed and ignored sex in the human conception and forced upon it and ourselves a moral boundary that is based on hypocrisy, self-denial, suppression, and that leads obviously, like it is written in many psychology researches as well, to all kinds of perversions, fetishes, rape, violent sexual fantasies, and all that stuff, because we as human beings seem to be unable to handle ourselves, especially nowadays, where we feign to have developed so far as if we had become such a powerful, ingenious race, but nevertheless we are not able to face our sexual side, our desires and mind possessions that keep us trapped and enslaved. And to make sure that no one ever dares to question these forces from the start, to trace them back to their roots, we taboo them and suppress each and every feeling, emotion and impulses of that kind. What we can see here in the video of Simulacron X is an example of such a successful programmed reaction of rejection, denial and self-obstruction. unable to bear even to listen to questions and answers of that kind without being aroused, without having an enormous emotional reaction. And in that one does not dare to question the heritage of those emotions and how and why they operate and direct the person. One prefers to take these judgmental reactions as universal laws, as granted by nature. But in fact they are developed and programmed by society, parents, education, friends and family, and they are in all ways artificially implanted. This is what the author refuses to see or even to question. Interestingly, one proclaims, by obviously being driven and directed by forces and emotions that are not under the person's control, to have an actual interest in truth, to be on a mission in the name of truth and freedom or something. So when we continue, we see that here the author seems to label sex as repulsive and repugnant, or to ask questions about sex as repulsive, repugnant, or cruel or malicious. So the question I ask here is, what is it that makes us think that openly being asked about sex or sexual preferences was something bad, malicious, or repugnant? Could it be that we ourselves in that important, huge area of life, like sex and sexual fantasies and activity, that we have many, many things that we do not want others to hear about? We do not want to share our sexual preferences, isn't it? We fear of being judged, and rightly so, as I would presume in many cases, especially concerning the male sexual mind. That is one reason why I suggest everyone should face his or her own mind creations, thoughts, conceptions about sex in special, but on all other relevant points as well, in absolute self-honesty, without hiding anything from yourself. Absolutely clear and naked, exposed, name and shame yourself, and take into consideration all the consequences. Just try it once, on one single point of your hidden thoughts, maybe on the most obvious abusive ones. Those may be the most suitable. Later on, those questions are again labeled, this time as awkward, which means that now the author tries to belittle his own reaction as if he was above such things and therefore looking down on them. Next, he is referring to the interpretation of those facial expressions of Katie in this video. So the identification of reactions and what they indicate in a person's facial expression is a scientific method. That is not even so scientific at all, because we as human beings do those interpretations all the time, subconsciously or consciously, whatever. This is an obvious fact that we interpret all kinds of facial expressions in other persons. So in fact you can trace back to the emotional state or to suppressions you can see in the face of a person when the person reacts to something, that something is going on there, on that point, that this point is an important point for him or her to face. So continuing, he is referring to some comments by the woman behind the camera or another woman in the room, I don't know exactly, and he is labeling her commenting on the facial expressions as cold-hearted. Why is that so? Does a woman always have to be driven and shattered by emotions? Does a woman have to be defending another woman that is being interviewed about sexual matters? What are the presumptions here? Isn't it rather rational and scientific to observe and report what is happening without being shaken or even blinded by emotional reactions? I mean, on the one hand, he is criticizing the way that Bernard leads the interview, that he seems to find the reactions funny, that he is laughing, etc. And on the other hand, he refers to a more rational commenting on the scene as cold-hearted. So this is another proof that Simulacron X is in no way interested in a common-sense perspective about what is happening in the video. He is obviously not unaffected by his own prejudices and therefore not qualified to do a review or to criticize a video vlog like this. This is merely about discrediting others, pushing one's own ego and beliefs in order to get attention. And this could be, in fact, one reason for picking a video about sex after all, because with tags and accusations of sexual abuse or violation, one can always attract the interest of many, many people, because everyone seems to agree on immorality of anything of that kind. Next point is the naming and shaming. What is being the point about this? What is being the point of this naming and shaming thing? I mean, we are all doing it here in our vlogs and blogs. We expose ourselves as what we have allowed and accepted ourselves to become. We directly draw the lines to show how our inner systems, commonly accepted as so-called human nature, support the outer system in all its extensive abuse, exploitation, torturing, and life-threatening nature. When we show off, we face ourselves in public to give and live an example of commitment, of real actual change, of taking responsibility for the world and for life. And we do not intend to protect old habits and traditions of sexual suppression, of sexual discrimination, and we do not intend to protect the hidden chambers of the mind which support all kinds of sexual abuse, perversions in thoughts, fantasies, and their manifestations in reality. Instead, we face, accept, and embrace what is here as what we have allowed to exist. We face it in self-honesty in order to transform ourselves, to stop acting and reacting out of pre-programmed habits, to stop ourselves from being directed and controlled by our emotions. We have nothing to hide and nothing to fear except our own self-deception and suppression, in hiding behind fake moral standards that support abuse, self-abuse, and the continuity of abusive behavior in all ways, especially the sexual. Continuing, he states that Bernard oppresses and abuses people. He says this shows how Bernard would resort to violence, and he states this would be an act of violence, oppression, and sexual abuse. So here we have again the projection of the conditioned mind, strictly refusing to see the true content and the intention of the videos. Those videos clearly show the following: self-acceptance, braveness to face one's own creations as the emotions, suppressed feelings, and the conditionings that are in control over the body, the reactions, and behavior. And this is in fact a real step towards truth, towards freedom, and towards reality. Our society does in fact fit much more into the perception of simulacron X, because here we actually do find all kinds of sexual abuse in reality, done to women and children, done in the minds of people. We find bullying of the sexual nature in schools, where children mock each other with sexual standards, and even children feel urged to adapt to sexual expectations. We find sexual discrimination in working places and in advertising. We find sexual abuse in institutions that should take care of our children. We find sexual exposure, naming and shaming in evening TV shows. But never do these events intend to face those points in self-honesty, to help people to direct themselves in order to transcend or transform their own enslavement of the mind. On the contrary, those are the real abusive strategies, to expose people and to find delight in it, to support the structures and systems, to find an audience that can identify with it, and at the same time point fingers at others, so that they won't have to look at themselves, to face and change themselves. This is actually, in fact, violence. This is delectation and mind masturbation, regardless.